very warm welcome to all of you. I'll just take a few moments to introduce each one of them. So first we have Kushal Majumdar, who is currently the Director of Finance and Operations at Path India. Kushal is a chartered accountant by profession and having more than 3 decades of experience in both domestic and international position in both for-profit and not-for-profit organization. So he has worked with Oberoi's, Reuters, and briefly with American Express. And for the past 2 decades, Kushal has worked extensively in the INGO setup, working with diverse functions like finance, admin, operation, compliances, in organization like Nutrition International now, Plan, Room to Read, and currently Path. And also he has worked with South Asian African countries. So welcome Kushal today to join us for this webinar. Then we have Pallavi Chaturvedi, who is Director of Finance and Systems for BCI India. Pallavi is a qualified chartered accountant and BCom honors from Hansraj. She is again a seasoned professional who has worked close to 2 decades in the development sector. Part of senior management team and having extensive experience working with national as well as international NGOs like Save the Children, WaterAid, Plan, and Clinton Foundation, to name few. And in her professional journey, she has handled diverse roles, which ranges from setting up legal entities, strategic financial management, audit, risk management functions, procurement, partnership management, and so on and so forth. So welcome Pallavi to join us for this webinar today. Then we have Rohit Nair, who is the CFO of Care India. Rohit is a SRCC alumni and chartered accountant, company secretary, and CISA, with over 2 decades of experience working with Indian as well as multinational corporation. And he made a judicious call joining this sector after serving Dell for almost a decade, wherein he joined Care as a CFO. So other than leading in finance role, he firmly believes in digital transformation, organization development, and so on and so forth. He has served, he has several industry accolades, including the key ones being Strategic CFO Award 2019 and CFO 2020 Role of Honor Award. And both these awards, it's heartening to know, have been while serving the social sector, which is good to witness. Rohit is a revered speaker on various forums and platforms, including CXO forums and Forbes, business schools, IIMS, Delhi University, and he's a contributing author and TV panelist. So thank you, Rohit, for joining us today. And of course, we have Sri Raman, who is the Chief Financial Officer at Helpage India, with over 3 decades of experience in the development sector. He is a management graduate from IRMA and a cost accountant. So he has worked in various organizations in the field of agriculture cooperatives, reproductive health, NCDs, public health, water, sanitation, and affordable health technologies. Although his prime domain has been finance, but his interest goes much beyond finance in the areas of program evaluation, CSR, NGO governance, organization development. So thank you all for joining us today, for this webinar. And it's heartening to see because I remember 12 years back, or little around that time, when I started working closely with this sector. Of course, INGOs always had capacities, but many of the other mid-tier organizations or grassroots organizations always struggled with the capacities and the skill sets, which over a period of past 1 decade has changed quite a bit, and we see a lot of professionals joining, and this is a testimonial to have you guys who are manning those functions across these NGOs, in the country. So great to have you all here, and I think we'll straight away start our discussion today. So to begin with, each one of you, I think, have led in your organization and responded to the current situation, handling constraints, whether it was planning, readiness of the organization, field staff augmentation, of course, change of getting up the systems and procedures also to respond to a situation, and keeping in mind the well-being of your staff. across, and each one of you, I think, other than finance, have multiple roles to play in your respective organization, whether it's IT, procurement. So it'll be good to know how each one of you actually handle those situations, and examples would be really good to know. And of course, for our participants also, we saw the list today, and there are people spectrum from INGOs, domestic organizations, some CSR fraternity or other donor fraternity people are there. Many grassroots level organizations have also registered. So it'd be good to know, from each one of you how you guys have navigated, and with few examples, it would be great. So if I can maybe start with Pallavi, if you're okay, and share your journey in the past few months, especially managing those functions, and share a few examples.
Good to be part of this important discussion. Thank you for having me. Broadly, I think these have been really challenging times for all of us over the past couple of months. And I think in terms of navigating through these times, everybody is still innovating and ideating about, how best to go from here to the unknown futures. So I think in terms of the immediate things that we've been able to do, one of the things that I just wanted to say was that this pandemic will be having a kind of an immediate and a short-term impact, and then a little more of a medium and a long-term impact. That's how we've been assessing it. In the immediate and long-term, a few things that I feel everybody perhaps has already done or is kind of thinking of doing is, having this remote working for everybody, and becoming a little more practical in that sense. The working from home aspect has two critical pieces to it, which is the hardware, which is the infrastructural element around it, and then the software part of it. And I think we need to invest time in both of those. And I'm sure my other panel members would also speak about it on what all they've been able to achieve in these two areas. Also, in terms of now with the growing, almost 90 days into the lockdown and working from home kind of situation, the pressures and demands of returning to field are also getting, gaining momentum. So I think that is also another challenge that we continue to face. And we are also opening up with kind of minimal, requirements from everybody, the field personnel and from the support personnel as well. At the same time, working with donors to really adjust plans and budgets, making sure that we are staying relevant in terms of the activities on the ground, and also communication and more communication. I mean, just making sure that we're talking to everybody, all our stakeholders, from donors to governments, to partners, to employees, making sure we're staying connected, having points of contact, having a scheduled conversation time with all of them, making sure with employees doing a pulse check, doing surveys, and staying connected, just making sure that we are, as if we would be if we were in close contact with people, just making sure that the e-contact is working as well as the physical contact. So I think those are certain things that are still work in progress, I would say. We haven't achieved the, the most perfect balance of everything. And as we are still, the situation is still evolving, and we are still watching things from the ground. And as such exercises will also determine we're learning from each other as well. So that's pretty much it, Vikas. I think the other panelists will also, I'll look forward to hearing from them as well.
Sure. So Rohit, if I come to you, if you want to share a few examples or live case studies, the way you would have navigated any of these support function, of late in past few months, so it'll be good to know.
Sure. Thanks, Vikas, for having me here. I hope I am audible.
Yeah, please go ahead. Yeah.
Great. So very good afternoon to everyone dialed in. Thanks for joining. Yeah, indeed, this pandemic has been a true test of leadership. And at Care India, we have been riding the storm both strategically and with compassion. Compassion for our people, for our communities, and also for the frontline workers. So way back in March itself, our board earmarked a dedicated fund from our reserves to kickstart the relief work on the ground. And what we did was we immediately formed a crisis management committee comprising of our CEO and the heads of program, fundraising, HR, myself in the capacity as CFO, which works under the regular guidance of the board to execute upon a three-pronged strategy, which encompasses the immediate phase, the recovery, and resilience building, because this is going to be a long haul. So as part of our flagship program, we already have a large team working in Bihar with the healthcare ministry, and they've been continuously supporting the healthcare needs of the state. And in view of this pandemic, the priorities have also been shifted in terms of attending to the pandemic needs, like contact tracing, etc. Besides, in terms of other work, we are well poised to reach total beneficiary count of over 3.5 lakhs by the end of this month across 10 plus states for various relief measures, including dry ration and the PPE kits, which we've been able to distribute across the country. So here, I think the role of the support functions, or the enabling function, which I would prefer to call them, is very critical to ensure that seamless operations happen on the ground. And hence, there is a need to constantly revamp ourselves. So what we have done is that a lot of nice to do things have been dropped to ensure that critical tasks are prioritized. We have simplified various processes, because this is a time when people really need stamina, energy, and motivation to deal with the current crisis rather than get entangled into the process bureaucracy. And as Pallavi also alluded, I think over communication is always better during such times of change and uncertainty, because amidst all this confusion, people, our staff, are always seeking clarity. So we have ensured that the staff is kept well informed about all the developments. We've provided them with all the necessary tools to do the work remotely. And kudos to our IT team who have been also proactively conducting various sessions, educating the staff and other consultants about the potential phishing and cyber attacks, which have grown many-fold during this pandemic period. Our field staff, who've been our real heroes on the ground, they have done various rapid assessments, surveys to help identify the people, the families who for some reason have not been covered under the various government schemes. So we've been able to identify and reach out to such marginalized section of the family, of the society. So the teams have really conducted a lot of trainings, awareness activities on the ground to spread, make people aware of the various protocols. We've been effectively using the social media to spread awareness on the ground, distributing immunity boosters. We've even developed detailed guidelines for the school, the community, children, in terms of do's and don'ts on how to really, what to do as we come out of this lockdown. On the procurement side, which again becomes very critical for any such relief activity, we've operationalized an accelerated approval mechanism to facilitate emergency procurement and fast track the entire process of purchase and distribution. In fact, our procurement team has been able to tie up with some very good large national vendors, which have helped us to procure quality and timely material and distribute that across the length and breadth of the country at the best prices as well. I'm also very proud of our entire finance team, which has really rallied around to support all these multifarious initiatives. Fortunately, we had done several digitization and automation initiatives earlier. The real benefit of that we all saw during this last 3 to 4 months, where the finance team could really operate very well out of home itself and facilitate timely financial support to our staff, as well as all the payments and other requirements for the vendors as well. Very happy to share that our annual year-end process also went very smoothly and effectively, and all statutory compliance is done timely. The donor reporting requirements were also met by our team, and in fact now we are engaged with our auditors to also explore remote audit opportunities, because the world is going to change for everyone. So we are working with our stat auditors to see how much can we do remotely. Our HROD team is also being very, very active in ensuring timely communications to staff. They've also tied up with various agencies which have been offering free e-learning courses and certification programs for our staff to really support the employee development efforts. They've been also keeping in touch with our prospective talent pipeline, because talent is always a key part. So they've ensured that we continue to engage with prospective candidates and develop the pipeline as well. So very proud that all these tireless efforts across the team, across the various functions, have ensured that our donors continue to fully support us, and we have been able to serve the marginalized communities to the best of our abilities.
Thanks, Rohit, for an elaborative response on each functional area. Kushal, if I can come to you for the next response on the same set of question, please.
Thanks, Vikas. Thanks. It's good to be here, and thanks, Pallavi and Rohit. Great to hear from both of you. Looking forward to what Sriraman will say. But yeah, I work for PATH. PATH is a public health INGO, and pandemic immediately, we immediately rose up to the occasion to address situations which we are more or less experienced of. We have been working with diseases for more than 40 years, so we could respond quickly. We have been focusing on government engagement. We work only with governments and both at the center and state. So government engagement was continuously happening to understand what kind of support the governments will need. So that led to certain discussions. We need to revisit the activities which we were doing. For example, in Bihar, we were doing a campaign on Japanese encephalitis, which had to be stopped, while the government wanted us to support on their data management with regards to COVID. So we redirected our efforts in that those sort of initiatives with the government. Likewise for UP. While we were doing with the government, we were also engaged with the donors, because these have got implications in terms of donors' expectations. One. Two is the funds they have been providing us, because that leads to reprogramming. So finally, PATH, the donors and the government came onto the same page and to play a very important role in addressing the pandemic as we are all, experiencing. So that was an immediate response from our side. Simultaneously, given the situation, we had to go for a situation of work from home like everyone. We went into work from home much earlier than before the lockdown started. That led to consistent staff engagement. We provided the tools and the trainings and, like mobile connectivities so that people remain connected. There were a lot of guidances going in so that people don't feel that they are, in a remote setup as remote and completely left out. So we continued to be connected. All were having calls and meetings. Simultaneously, we were also working in giving them trainings. We underwent many trainings like basic Excels, basic PowerPoints. We had very, very interesting fun moments using digital platform, on Zoom and on Teams. So we were all engaged, largely driven by both our HR and communication teams. The foremost thing which we had a strong focus on, globally, we have a pandemic preparedness response team. So we were driving into the staff safety, because as we were responding to the government, we were also having our colleagues, as Rohit rightly said, the heroes in the front line, so that support continued with them. and we provided all guidance in terms of safety. We transferred funds so that they could immediately look at safety equipments like masks and sanitizers. So that happened. The most important and interesting aspect what happened is this: our business continued, given that we had an interesting opportunity of our enterprise resource system with our accounting system, which runs on automatically on the cloud. So the migration was very quick. The tweaking of processes was not too much drag race from what we are used to. So we could seamlessly continue supporting the organization as per the business need as we move forward in supporting the pandemic situation. So that has been our engagement experience so far, and we continue with that. That's from my side, Vikas.
Sure. Thanks, Kushal, for exhaustive response on dealing with the government side, especially. Sriraman, I'll come to you, and especially you're working with the elderly population who are also most vulnerable. So of course, for HelpAge, I'm sure the program criticality was at a different state. So it'd be good to know how the support functions, made sure that you continue to support the way, in a normal parlance to the maximum extent possible.
Yeah, well, thank you. Thanks for inviting me to this webinar, and happy to be part of it. So nice to hear what the earlier speakers like Pallavi, Rohit, and Kushal shared their experience. Well, for HelpAge India, responding to any disaster is not something new. HelpAge India always used to respond to any kind of disaster. Even earlier years, we have responded to the disaster situation. But this disaster is something different. This disaster is something which is nationwide, or rather worldwide disaster. And the second one is, usually we respond post-disaster situation. But here we had to operate on a concurrent basis, even when the disaster is on, or even when the disaster was just building up and it was increasing. So that's the situation that we were in. It had its own challenges in terms of, maybe most of our staff, while they volunteered to be on the field, some had their own reluctance to go to the field in this kind of a situation, because we also deal with, as you mentioned, the most vulnerable population, so we couldn't ignore them. So in fact, we had already started working on, educating them, informing them. All the IEC activities had started even before the lockdown. That's what HelpAge had initiated even before. But after that, the programmatically, it changed to more of a response in terms of providing them relief kits, etc. So those things actually we started maybe about 2-3 days after the lockdown. That was the quickness with which we could start the activities. So initially, to engage with, to make the staff move to the field, we also had to take an additional insurance cover for the staff, because as HelpAge, we felt it is necessary to mitigate the risk of engaging the staff, working in the community, to go to the field. So we took an insurance cover for all the staff. That's one HR response which we saw. And from the other finance angle, we anyway had invested heavily, like what Rohit had said earlier, into our IT and software. So we could seamlessly work from home, including the procurement function, the payment function, accounting function, everything could operate easily out of home. So we had some bit of a challenge in terms of hardware, because some of our staff used to work from their desktop computers, but when their office is not functioning, so we had to suddenly find some laptops for them to work with. So that was a bit of a challenge that we had. Otherwise, we as a support function, we could step forward and we could support the activities of our program to ensure that all the elderly who needed the support could be delivered on time. In fact, in the last 3 months' time, when you compare it with our earlier year spend, we possibly have more of spend in the last 3 years. Usually, as it usually happens in the development sector, the first quarter you do not have much of spend. But this year it's a reverse. Even in the initial couple of months, the spend has been much more, because it is more on the relief front. So we could accelerate the spend, and we could support the activities because of our IT systems which are already in place.
So thanks, Srinath. I think what I could gauge, and thanks for very astute and lustrous response from each one of you. So of course, we all have spoken, heard what individual organizations have done to respond, especially on the support function, readiness. It would be also good to hear, from you, because we have participants in the audience from small, mid-tier organizations also. That what you foresee, and I would request any one of you can probably respond. Maybe Rohit, this time you can. Outside your organization, what are the key learnings probably from the manning the function? Other than finance, procurement, you can pick anyone, which probably could be a good takeaway for the participant for today. So any example or any learning, cross learning within the organization outside that could be a takeaway would be helpful. So Rohit, if you can probably start.
Sure, thanks, Vikas. Well, I'm reminded of what the legendary boxer Mike Tyson once famously said, and I quote, "Everyone has a plan until they get punched in the mouth. Then they stop in fear and freeze." So I think this Black Swan event is really a test of our endurance and resilience. And most of the organizations are surely badly bruised, but one should refuse to be knocked down, is my key message. So a crisis really puts the spotlight on our vulnerabilities, our problem areas, which we've been perhaps ignoring or not even aware of. So when a crisis hits, we are forced to confront the truth about how our systems work or maybe don't work. And I think in the development world, I probably am still a novice, but a peculiar feature of the development world is that those who are paying for the services are generally not the same as those receiving them. So this is, I'm talking about donors on the one side and the community beneficiaries on the other. So sometimes both groups don't really fully understand or appreciate each other's needs and interests. Therefore, as a development organization, facilitating and enhancing the understanding amongst these groups needs to be a top priority. And high donor engagement is very critical to sustain the ongoing projects hampered by the crisis. So one of the success story for us over the last quarter is that we've been very proactively reaching out to our donors, appraising them about the changing needs of the communities at the ground level. We could also convince them to suitably customize some of the project work and thereby channelized the project funding into the COVID relief work. Also, I believe this is a reality check for companies who have been always reluctant to embrace automation or digital transformation. As my fellow panelist also alluded, it's very important for organizations of all sizes. Sometimes we feel that digital transformation or automation can be done only by large organizations, but we need not boil the ocean here. I think it's very important that organizations should consider to probably look at even simple back-end processing automating solutions, which are very, very less capital intensive. Another critical factor which is often ignored, but is a very good practice to follow, is that all the official data is stored on a common shared drive for ease of access and security. During this work from home times, any issues with laptops can be huge damage. We've also had few cases, but thankfully we didn't lose any official data, as people were attuned to saving everything on the shared drive. So I think that's very one critical but often ignored practice, which often leads to data loss and other issues. Really, crisis forces organizations to think creatively about new ways to engage. So we all of us need to really, brainstorm within our organizations, and see how best we can serve our constituents. And we have several examples, of companies like WhatsApp, Airbnb, Uber. These were all founded in the aftermath of the 2008 crisis. So I'm sure, we would, with the right approach, we can all come out of the fray stronger, more agile, and more community-centric than ever before.
Well,
That would be my key message.
thanks, Rohit, with connecting with the live people. I think it's always good to hear that. And as you rightly said, you don't need to boil the ocean. Actually, everybody can do in bits and pieces. As Kushal also mentioned that something as simple as training employees on Excel or simple Microsoft tools also, which can possibly make a huge difference in such scenarios, would be a game changer. So Pallavi, it'll be good to hear from your side any such takeaway for the participants within or outside your current organization experience.
Yeah, I think just echoing some of the thoughts that Rohit has said, investment in technology, I think it's not for the biggies alone. There are very cost-effective, solutions available where online platforms can be used for e-archiving. Simple ERP solutions are also available, which are low-cost solutions, which can be adopted by organizations. Also, digitization of documents, making sure that e-archiving is something that is adopted by everybody across. It's a very low-cost intervention, but goes a long way in ensuring reviews seamlessly happening. And it's so simple to do that. Many processes, just storing data that you collect from the field, which is again from part of the entire assurance architecture. Making sure that you have those in e-form. Use of mobile technology. There are such simple mobile apps that are available, and those that can also be developed at very low cost. Sometimes in-house as well. If you have smart IT people, as one of our IT personnel has done for us, for scanning of the fixed assets, doing a physical verification, just simple barcoding. So I mean, those kinds of things that you should try and tap into everyone's potential, and staying connected for sure. As I said earlier, you can't do enough of that. Staying connected with your donors, making sure that you are informing them of what's going on the ground. There are emerging needs from the ground. Things are changing, things are dynamic. Making sure that that is being prioritized by the donors. Also reviewing your business model. Sometimes certain revenue sources may come into a little bit of a question mark a little down in the future. It will be good to study your business model from a revenue sources point of view to see how sustainable that is, or to diversify, or to see how you can, build on that. We in PCI are doing, bits and pieces of all of this at different points in time, at different, measures of success for each of these, but we're still dealing with it. And I think it's equally important for everyone else to do so as well.
So thanks, Pallavi. These are very pertinent, I think, basic points at times, we miss out. And I recall, as you mentioned that IT is not for biggies and you don't have to invest more, because I'd seen there was a regional, NGO which actually inducted few interns from our IT institute who developed the M&E system for them pro bono actually. And it's been almost a year and they're running it fantastically well. So yeah, good, to hear that resolution. Sriraman, if you can, share some of those takeaways and experiences.
Yeah, one major takeaway after handling the finance and accounts for 3 decades is that, we learned how to operate a finance function seamlessly with paperless office. So otherwise the finance function usually is always full of files and full of vouchers all across the table. But during the lockdown, I think we learned how to operate the finance function paperless. So of course, by sharing papers on emails and through our software, etc., uploaded, which is uploaded in the software. But otherwise, it is something which came automatically in the last 3 months' time only to operate. But what we need to see is, how this can be systematized, and we move to a situation where we don't have paper moments, less of paper moments, because the paper moment itself is considered as risky these days. So how do we make it a systematic policy? We reduce the paperwork, and this may also make the finance function more cost effective, because we end up taking too many printouts, maybe not so environment friendly in that process. So these are things which we may be able to, these are takeaways from this, and maybe we can implement it later on.
I'm sure, I think saving on paper would be a reasonable one for many organizations these days, because most of us are working from home.
But it all depends on the concurrence of the statutory auditors as well.
Of course, we'll discuss it separately. Great, thanks. Kushal, it'll be good to know your points on some of those takeaways that possibly you can share here.
No, thanks. It was good to hear all of them, and I will not touch upon technology. Is a well accepted way forward. So yeah, but what I would like to highlight here, especially given what I've been seeing over the years across many countries, is people's ability to adapt to technology. And therefore, I would suggest that one of the areas, whatever I'm saying from a perspective of implementing agencies, organization at the grassroots level, that they need to look at reskilling staff so that they are well ready. There's a sense of readiness in terms of taking in new technology as they move forward. There's a variety of challenges which we have seen amongst organizations and amongst people within the organization that needs to be addressed. So trainings, reskilling the staff, a preparedness there. That is one. The other aspect is it's my belief in terms of keeping organizations resilient and agile is an ability to understand what you need. Sometimes we think we need more than what we end up actually needing. And this pandemic has probably indicated that. So what I mean to say is this: look at the structure of the organization. Do we need the roles which we already have? Or are we having more than what we need? Do we need to consider business continuity practice with a core team so that pandemic and crisis scenarios can be, taken, passed through in a manner which is more seamless and having less difficulties or heartburns or bloodsheds, I would say, as you move forward through challenges? Those are the areas I would request such organizations to look at. This will lead to donor engagement. A point Rohit did start touch base between beneficiaries and donors, but I would say between the organization and donors, just for the benefit of organization sustainability and the ability not to lose their core competency, and while making and keeping themselves relevant during crisis scenarios. That would be my learnings or takeaways, if I make or can recommend to organizations at the grassroots level.
Sure. Thanks, Kushal. I think it's good to acknowledge that fact that being from the social space, I think cost optimization, efficiencies, and rationalization, we have to actually start thinking some way or the other, which I'm sure organizations were doing, but I think we need to put more structure and thoughts around those elements also, other than BCP and all, IT. So thanks for that. So, and also, I would like to share to the participants before I move to the next discussion point. See, all the four panelists, and there are many more who have sort of given a feedback for a handbook, which, we as a thought leadership released, sometime back, which is an NGO handbook on the functional areas. So we would share that handbook to the people who are registered for this webinar. And the intent is that we have been, trying to reach out to more than 1.5 to 1.75 lakhs registered NGOs within the country, through various means and networks. So we'll share that. I'm sure maybe there could be a duplicacy that some of you might have it, but we'll share that also. And there are many viewpoints which might be helpful, for grassroots to mid-level organizations on support function. So moving to the next, aspect, I will, focus this part of the, question to Pallavi and Kushal both. Now it will be good to know, especially knowing that, things won't be normal again the same it was earlier. So what would be the views and expectation on the support function, especially for their future strategies, and what are the opportunities you foresee next, maybe 1 to 2 to 3 years, whether it's innovation, technology, leverage, or any other thoughts, because I'm sure the way things moved in the past few months, progressively, we need to change our gears, and especially on those support functions. So we want to know your viewpoints from a bit mid-term strategy, maybe 2 years, how you foresee those expectations to, now undergo change. So Pallavi, if you can probably start, and then I'll come to Kushal for the response.
Yeah, I think a lot of that has been said in bits and pieces already. Yeah, but just to reiterate that, since as I was, saying earlier as well, this is, and someone else also said that this is a long haul, and we got to gear up for it, and we got to prepare ourselves for it. So the not-for-profit scene, the way it is today, is not going to be the same going forward, and priorities are going to change. Both at the donor end and also at the end of the field, and governments as well. A lot of us work with governments as well, and governments are also going to reprioritize, their programming, their activities, their budget allocations. So I think having a kind of, being aligned with that is really important. Reviewing business models, as I just said earlier as well, is extremely, extremely important, because I think for us also, as a not-for-profit, your agenda is not-for-profit, but the business has costs and other elements which need to be taken care of. So from that standpoint, also looking at the organization design, the way organizations are designed currently, the kind of roles and responsibilities and the way the structures are also designed will also need to be relooked at, because this isn't going to remain the same for the future. As Kushal was alluding to, the kind of a core team, a kind of a response, a team, or a much leaner, much thinner management, perhaps, which is something which is going to be the thing for the future. Also, a lot of the legislations, perhaps, will also need to be reviewed by the governments, because the way the not-for-profits are regulated today are regulated also because the way they are structured, the way they are accessing funds, the way they employ personnel. So a lot of these personnel legislations relating to personnel, one of them was the PF, which was kind of amended for this duration, but these may also need to be relooked at from the future perspective. From a long-term employment to a consulting arrangement to fixed-term employments to those kinds of things will also be certain things which I feel will get impacted, because organizations will look at all the options available to them for ease of implementation, and also, keeping their costs in check. Again, just making sure that the future investments that we are making in the IT enablement of the entire functioning of the organizations will be so much more. Remote working is one thing which I think some organizations and some industries have already taken it to the level of a science. Like I'm sure there are IT organizations like Infosys, IBM, which are doing it in a really great manner, where they're able to do everything very, very beautifully. But again, as I said, we don't have those kinds of big pockets for us to be investing. But again, there are examples that we can borrow and contextualize it for our own ways of functioning. And that will be something that we'll continue to keep an eye on, to make sure that we keep learning, even from consulting entities like yours. I mean, GT is doing it, EY is doing it, IBM is doing it. These organizations have been doing it in a really smart way, and making sure that there are enough and more assurance and control mechanisms built in while people are working remotely and with the objectives in mind. So those are the kinds of things that we'll need to keep an eye for in the future.
Well, thanks, Pallavi. I think these are pretty insightful and thoughtful areas, which progressively, I think, everybody has to allude, going forward in some, way or the other. So thanks for that. Kushal, any inputs on those side, please?
Yeah, just a quick one. I don't want to repeat myself. I completely agree to what all of you are saying. Pallavi, I want to expand beyond the business modeling, which you said. One of the things which I think all organizations are looking at, probably ours are, in terms of looking at, expanding the donor base, looking at a different stream of working. For example, we as a public health organization, we are largely and significantly invested in looking at avenues and forays in digital health, artificial intelligence and public health. We have gone into that, coming out of traditional ways of doing things, coming out of traditional donors. And it is very important. The world has changed. The world has been changing in terms of, organizations. We never knew of Amazon earlier. We never knew of the way today Google is, right? So those has triggered, and this creates opportunity. And I'm sure there are a lot of organizations who can grab that opportunity by revisiting their business models and seeing what kind of donors would be able to fund them and take their organization objectives and focus forward. Yeah. And obviously support functions will be supporting those changes as it happen, because they should be great players as enablers in making things happen as organization changes their strategies and moves forward. Yeah, that's from my side, because.
Thanks, Kushal. And also, since we're discussing, I could see a few questions, converging now and earlier also, when the registration happened. So a few of the organizations were asking that, as we all, I think, sort of comfort that IT investment, maybe big, small, depending upon the size, is something which one has to sort of do. So there's certain organizations which don't have a corpus or, unrestricted money to sort of do that. Any response on the side that wherein people are asking that, does the donor sort of support, from that capacity building perspective to organizations who are working phenomenally well on the ground on the IT investment side? And if yes, or, many people have asked that, what are those conversations that can happen and which side of organizations they can reach out probably to have those, sort of investments. So any one of you, probably can sort of respond.
Can I go ahead?
Please, please.
See, this is a continuous engagement. It is a continuous engagement in making to come to the same understanding that what I need and what you can offer. Because it is this is a whole ecosystem you're talking of. It's not a one single player. And therefore, so regular engagement is necessary, and there will be an opportunity coming up. And especially, it is not only implementation agencies, not only development sector. When we talk of development sector, we also involve donors. Donors has their own objectives. I'm sure they're also looking at technology as a foray into making things happen. So this is an opportunity again to have the conversation and take it forward. So they should be looking at it. All the organizations should be looking at it. Building that conversation, talking points. Yeah.
So Vikas, if I may come in.
Please.
Yeah, so when you look at IT investments, I don't think we need to look at investments in terms of crores or multiple lakhs. There could be small improvements even, for example, we got a beneficiary tracking app done just for a very limited cost, which affordable cost, just because we felt that it is necessary in this situation to, when we are distributing the relief kit to so many lakhs of people, to have proper tracking of who received the beneficiary kit. So tomorrow, if we are asked, we are able to answer to the donors and also be transparent ourselves. So IT investment need not mean that, no, you have to make investment in crores. It could be even small money, which is, but it is just a will to invest. And coming to where to fund this money from, possibly, you need to negotiate with the donors, and possibly you need to allocate it within your existing projects. If you have 10 projects, can you allocate it within the project? So that's what you should be able to look at. So instead of looking at one particular donor funding for your IT, which may not happen. That's what.
Sure. Please, Pallavi.
Yeah, I think as a tangible piece, there's a Google grant that is available for, for people who can subscribe to it. It's again dependent upon usage. Also, you can use it for IEC and, just spreading your messages. So, I mean, the comms guys would know more about it and they can speak more. But in my experience, they've used that. Also, NASSCOM Foundation NASSCOM does give you there are some subsidized hardware and software linkages available from if you enroll in one of their things. So the IT guys can check that out as well.
No, I'm sure that's helpful for many of them, who are asking this question. Thanks. And so, we move to next question is more driven to Sriraman and Rohit. Of course, with the changing expectations, and the priorities, most of the time, what happens if anything goes wrong, support functions are the first one to get, blamed on. So keeping those perspective in mind, of course, I'm sure there would be a lot of new projects which would be getting converted with the donors, and the way probably the organization would be entailing it for the benefit of the ultimate communities and beneficiaries. There would be emerging trends, which would be surfacing in next couple of years. So, and of course, other than that, there could be the ones which you are already doing as a focus area, or maybe there could be themes which might emerge, basis the comfort of donors working with you. So it'll be good to know from maybe, Rohit, if you can go first, what are those, trends which you foresee that will, whether it's on the program implementation, how support function is, working with agility, on, or maybe, something on M&E. So what are those aspects which you foresee will change course in the next few years?
Yeah, sure, Vikas. I think, first of all, in terms of, ethical leadership, though it continues to be paramount in all times, it needs to be more visible during such a crisis.
And sorry, Rohit, I'll just interrupt. Also, in your response, if you can also dovetail the board expectation also, because, I remember both CARE and HelpAge, of course, have got, pretty heavy board. So that will be also good to know, actually.
Sure. Yeah. So, as I said, ethical leadership needs to be even more visible during such a crisis. And there comes, it's very important for, just as a head of finance, the CFO should be sharing an unvarnished truth with both the internal and external stakeholders, which includes the board as well. Because all the critical business decisions cannot be made unless the management teams and board of directors are on the same page. So it's very important to have that level of transparency and a fair and balanced dialogue and a well-structured process for gaining agreement on these strategic plans. So it's really important that, from a CFO perspective, the situations, the actual performance is shared objectively with the board. And also there is a need to, come up with different scenarios, because all said and done, I don't think anybody currently is in a position to do a very long-term plan with certainty. So it's important to draw up some probable scenarios as to how things will unfold in the future. And from an organization point, I think, as we also discussed, technology adoption needs to be really accelerated. And two critical skills, I would say, is really innovation and active learning at all levels of the organization. So probably we need to reinvent ourselves, learn, unlearn, and relearn, and probably, transform the way how development sector would have been working all through the years. So we really need to look at avenues in terms of, encouraging or supporting some unlikely collaborations, say, between two NGOs, or probably, we have recent cases where NGOs have tied up with grocery companies to ensure distribution is done to the poor and the needy. So, those type of collaborations can be really accelerated. And having the sector is working in India for so long, and probably we can call ourselves subject matter community experts. I think there is also a need to educate the donors to really help focus on the real needs and requirements of the community, and continue to invest in knowledge, human resources, identify new opportunities, and most importantly is to move quickly. I think sometimes we think any decision is like a one-way entry and there could not be any exit. But I would encourage that we should try different things. Not everything will work out, but we should really move quickly, and we can leave for perfection can wait for some time, but there is a need to really explore new ways of working. New ideas need to be thrown up, and the donor has to be really engaged. That's probably one of the outreach required from our organizations to proactively come up with these path-breaking ideas. And as a CFO, I think one needs to really consider both danger as well as opportunities as the two parts of the crisis to ensure that we all sleep well at night. And I'd like to conclude by saying that never let go a serious crisis go waste. It's an opportunity to do things one could not do before. So we truly become wiser by adversity. So keep the faith. God bless would be my key message. Thank you.
Thanks for that concluding statement, Rohit. Yeah. Sriraman, if you want to come and then.
After such an optimistic view from Rohit, I don't think I have anything great to add, but I would just say that, yes, I agree with him that we need to be very, very transparent in this kind of a situation with our board, with our own colleagues, with our own staff, in terms of where we are and what is that we are planning to do in the coming months. So obviously, predicting the future is going to be very difficult. Making a projection, financial projection, whether it is for mid-term, long-term, medium term, is going to be it's going to be difficult. So what we should be focusing on is maybe a kind of a rolling reforecast, which we keep doing maybe in a month's time or every couple of months. We keep reforecasting where we will be at the end of the year. And that is particularly necessary for organizations like HelpAge, which is more dependent on unrestricted funds than donor funds. If you are dependent on donor funds, possibly you will have more clarity of what is getting approved and what you will have, and what are the programs which you need to implement during the next 1 year time. But if you are dependent more on unrestricted funds, you need to also look at what is coming into your kitty for you to spend in the next few months' time. So it's necessary that we keep doing this rolling reforecast. And yes, we have to have proper systems in place to track all income and expenditure in time. So that way, the staff also need to get more systematic in terms of they submitting their claims in time. They so that the donor utilization, everything can also go in time. So that's something which is important during the coming months.
Sure, thanks, Sriman. I think both Rohit and you clearly outlined a few themes which are, of course, collaboration, innovation is one aspect, but I think reforecasting, as you mentioned, of course, that is emerging as a very pertinent, I think, subject in the past few discussion and conversation, and I think the assumptions will also undergo change, and that's what everybody's saying, that even though you have to reassume every second month, I think at least you'll be more closer to the reality with those reassumption and reforecasting. Yeah. Anything, Pallavi, question you want to add on this piece?
Just a quick note, Sorry, Pallavi, go ahead. Okay. I think the board needs to also be aligned, as Sriraman said, in terms of transparency, in terms of having a very similar understanding and information what the management has, so that the moving ahead is easier, because there will be a lot of larger decisions coming up. One of the important aspects of it is very new, and maybe because you will be dealing with it or already dealing with it, is is a concept of risk management in terms of pandemic. It might be rewritten. And that is where the board may need to weigh in to probably handhold the management in terms of how to move ahead. There will be a lot of challenges. Another aspect which should not at all be going out of the table, I think, is the employer's obligation for duty of care so far employees are concerned. It's not only your personal well-being or your physical well-being, it is the mental well-being which the employers should not at all pass it on. They must take cognizance of it and act on it. You know, because it's a very, very new thing. And I'm sure all of us have heard a lot of stories because of real stories, it's real fact that has come up which we were never used to. So these are the areas I would think that the board and the senior leadership will be working very much together to take the organization forward.
Sure. I think that's pretty valid. I think earlier risk management used to be, the subject for the for-profit, I'll say, and some of the very few limited big organizations. But I think in parts of each organization, in some way or the other, I think risk management has got triggered off, during this current situation, which one has to sort of look and read up on those. It not necessarily need to be in a very, big framework, I think, but one can always, make attempts to make sure whatever is risk for an organization to operate in its own domain and then try to work on those elements. Thanks to bring that up. One question which has also, come up, although we are running out of time, maybe we'll take, this question. And we found this coming in repeatedly, in the registration and now also. What are the key elements people want to know that on a field staff SOP should go into to make sure that, from a functional area support perspective, because, what happens that many organizations do have SOPs and process outlined very clearly. But on the field, actually for the field staff, they are quite, not that well structured. So people are asking what could be the potential few broad areas which one should ensure while preparing a field SOP actually for the field staff necessarily. So any one of you probably, can respond.
I would like to.
With,
sorry, Sriram. Go ahead, please.
Sorry. So maybe with about 900 field staff working on the field right now, maybe I should attempt to answer it, but I'm not an expert in that. But all that I would say is, the guidelines are very clear about the safety norms. Please don't ignore those guidelines on safety. Please take all precautions necessary. Don't take anything lightly. That's all I would want to say.
Sure.
Sriraman, you took away whatever I wanted to say. Thank you. I agree with you.
Sure. So thanks to all of you. I think we already surpassed the time we have outlined for the session. Thank you all and it's good to know the prerogatives you have faced those challenges in the recent past and your thought process also for the way things might undergo change in the near future. Thanks a lot. And thanks to all the participants to join us today for this webinar and look forward for few more coming up with the thought leadership series. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Bye. Bye. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.
Thank you very much. Bye-bye.
Thanks all.